All right. Well, we're ready to roll here. So we'll start the event. And I think there's one of us that's on as an attendee. I'll go over there and take a look in a minute. So
Has Maurice tried to join yet?
I haven't seen yet. So anyway, well, it is 7 o'clock. It is the Fishers Historical Society. I'm excited about. I have very little voice, so we'll do what we can on this. But we will. I'm looking forward to introducing you to the board members of the Fishers Historical Society, and that's frankly 4 years ago is what got me involved. Is they were having their notices on Facebook that they were having meetings on Zoom, because of COVID, and I got a chance uh, to check it out. So anyway, hopefully that if someone watching tonight will have the same opinion and decide to come play with us. So hang on a second, real quick. I've got okay. Rosie Whit. No, she's not one of our members, so we'll have her just over there to watch with us. So anyway, well, guys, I want to introduce you. So Shirley, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are. You've been with the organization for a while, haven't you?
Was that me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I have. I think I probably joined though during COVID because, like you, I saw something about Historical Society and Fishers on Facebook, and I initially contacted Diane Welchel, who started the society, because of her Welchel name, and I can get to that later. But I'm regent of Horseshoe Prairie DAR chapter, which meets in Noblesville and Fishers. I'm on the Hamilton County Cemetery Commission because I just love chasing dead people. And so there's a couple things that I do on a regular basis.
So, okay, well, very good. So, have Robert, why don't you introduce yourself?
So I'm Robert Bowling. I'm the historian for the Fishers Historical Society. I got involved, like just like with um, like everyone else. Diane started this organization. She asked me would I be a part of it. I had already been writing some historical articles for the Current, and yeah, so since then I've been the historian. I was also a board member of the Ambassador House, which we dissolved our board about 2 years ago. Um, but we also hosted the Battle of Mudsock, which most people who live in Fishers know. That famous battle, which wasn't really a battle, it was more of a 2-day bar fight that took place in the center of town. But it is closely intertwined with our city. I mean, you can't talk about Fishers without talking about the Battle of Mudsock. So it comes up every year, and we hosted an historical reenactment for 2 years, and try to bring that event to life.
Well, very good. Wilbur, tell us about yourself.
Well, let's see. I don't even know how I got involved in the historical society, but I love it. There's just a lot of history in Fishers. I've I've lived in or near Fishers my whole life. I grew up at 96th Street in um, Hague Road, which eventually became 96th and I-69. But that's where I grew up on a farm down there, and um, a lot of Fishers history in my background. Although I lived in Hamilton County, so I lived on the other side of the tracks, but came up to Fishers. A lot of my friends are Fishers. I live in Fishers and have for the last, oh gosh, 50 years, I guess. But the early part of my life was on the other side of the tracks. But good memories from Fishers.
All right. Shelley, introduce yourself and who you are.
You said me?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm doing the best I can. I have very little voice. So.
Fine. I'm Shelly Arthur, and I've been on the board for a year or two, I guess. And I like history. I like just trying to think of maybe new projects for our group. And we've done the parade a couple times, and I've enjoyed doing that. And I also really enjoy kind of like Shirley doing the cemeteries or looking up dead people. So, and maybe where they were from, or just the history of where they lived. And so I like to do a lot of the maps and stuff like that and look up that stuff. So, um, and been living here for about 10 years now. So enjoy the history of everything.
Excellent. Well, Maurice is not part of our board, but he has been in Fishers longer than any of us. Moved away recently to Salem, Indiana, but we've got him here to give it, kind of fill in some of the blanks from before we were here. So, Maurice, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Maurice Johnson, and I live in Salem, Indiana now. Born in 1940.
We got we froze up on you. Okay, go ahead.
And we moved away in 84. I got transferred to Shreveport, Louisiana, and went from there to Omaha, back to Salem, Indiana. Our son was athletic director here, and unfortunately, we lost him 13 years ago and with a massive heart attack. But I jotted down a few things that I thought some of you might enjoy. Remembering things some of the old timers said, and Wilbur kind of shared something with me the other day when we came up for Dave Lawson's funeral, about the city building happened to be sunk or something. I'm not sure just on that, but I can remember some of the old timers telling about Fisher Station or Mudsock, and they had to, as I understood, they had to lay logs and stuff on where 116th Street is now, because it was in a swamp. And I think probably in the early days, Fisher's had a mill, tavern, grocery store, a couple grocery stores, and some garages, blacksmiths. And New Britain was just about the size of Fisher's in the early days. And for some reason, Fisher's took off and New Britain didn't. But I think there was a couple of stores in New Britain. And but back in my early days, I delivered papers in Fishers, knew just about everybody. I think there was about 230 or 250 people lived in Fishers. There was 2 or 3 garages, and there was a blacksmith. Hugh Gratner was on Lantern Road, and it was everybody knew everybody. Nobody locked doors. It was just a friendly little town. And I delivering papers. I delivered the Indianapolis Times, and I had to get 40 new customers to win a trip to Washington, D.C. And of course, and back in those days, papers were a nickel. We got paid less than a penny for delivering them. And I went around, and a lot of people took the times just to get the 40 new customers. And I did win a trip to Washington. And if you can imagine all these kids, and I was in the 4th grade, and we went down Union Station, and Mom, when she picked it up, she said most of them had the same clothes on when we came back as what we left in. So, and I think I took $7 and came back with 4. But
what year would that have been, Maurice?
That had to be about 52, somewhere in there. But I was telling Wilbur the other day that when they tore down the Fisher School, the bell, Dad and myself and 2 or 3 other people there, Mike Dodd and Pete West, we took the bell out of the belfry of the old school. It's now in the lawn of the Fishers United Methodist Church, and there's a big tower. My dad built that, and we put the bell there. But I think Wilbur said he didn't know that story, but there's lots of stories around Fishers, and of course a lot of them. My dad operated probably one of the first filling stations, gas station in Fishers. It was a little building just west of the Nickel Plate Railroad there on 116th Street. It was Standard Oil. And he moved from there to the Manship Garage, and was there until the Depression hit. Of course, everybody lost everything. Dad told me, he said people would come in there and wanting to trade eggs, half a hog for milk and all, but he said he couldn't pay his bills with that, produce. So he finally just had to shut the business down and move on. And I think he went from there to Delco Remy, and then from Delco Remy to Firestone. But there's I can remember when Mack Reynolds bought the John Deere dealership there in Fishers. I think they had sold one tractor about a year and a half, and Mack went in there and turned that business around. And I can remember there was a fire there, and all the men around Fishers pitched in and helped Junior clean up. I think Dad took an air compressor up there, but what I'm getting at, those days people helped one another a lot more. I'm not saying they don't do that today, but the Fishers Fire Department was put all together with volunteers. Dickie Woods and some of those laid the block, and Dad did the wiring, and there was Peterson did some of the plumbing, and so many people, Dub Clark, and a lot of people, but it was all done with donated lumber and labor. And I was a secretary of the Fisher Volunteer Fire Department, and our budget from Delaware Township, I think, was $600. I think we got $500 from Fall Creek, and maybe $300 or $400 from Wayne. And most of our money was made through the fish fry.
Right.
We shut down 116th Street, and if you could imagine that, people had to come around by the lumber yard on South Street and come back out. But that's how we was able to keep the fire department going. And a lot of people donated merchandise to give away raffles and stuff like that, but it was all donated. Time, labor, you didn't get paid for anything. And I think the only thing we got as firemen was they furnished our boots, jackets, and our hats. And I think later on we did get a dress shirt and a tie and a belt, but when we had our meetings. But and then back when they tore the school down and everything, and Southeastern School was out in the middle of a cornfield. Everybody said, "What in the world are they thinking? Building a school way out there in the middle of nowhere." But look at it today. And my dad, back in the early 50s, we didn't have much to do. We would go down to Fishers and sit on the steps there by the White Kitchens. It was near the post office. And my dad said, one day this will be a 4-lane road through here. Now, at that time, probably one car came down 116th Street every 30 or 45 minutes. And he would say, this will be a 4-lane highway one of these days. And everybody just kind of snickered and thought, well, that's crazy, but it happened. Look at Fishers today. And fortunately, where I grew up, my dad's home is still there at Lantern Road, and just a little south of 116th Street. And Dad had that house moved from Conner Prairie. It was a skeet. Lilies use it as a skeet house where they shoot birds and stuff like that. But had been a depression, and I think Dad told me he got that house moved from Conner Prairie there on the lot. I think it was $500 or $600 they moved it, but and then I can remember at Conner Prairie, we used to hunt. And the old mansion there was vacant. Us kids would camp out in there. And back in those days, we would find quite a few Indian artifacts, arrowheads, and you name it, we found it. And also out on 106th Street, where McKinstry's lived, Sand Creek and Fall Creek come down there. I'm not just sure. It's just about 1.5 miles east of Lantern Road on 106th. If you go down through there, it's kind of a valley, and then them two creeks come in there. But as a kid, I think, I'm pretty sure that was an Indian camp, because it's scouts and kids. We found all kinds of artifacts and stuff down there. And but we also, as kids, would use that hill in there to take our sleds and sled down there, and then Randall's Hill on 116th Street, because you didn't have any traffic,
Right.
no cars or anything like that. But the way I remember Fishers, it was people helping people and caring people. And, somebody had problems, a fire or something, everybody chipped in and, got clothes and got them back on their feet the best they could. And the early times in my life was, the White Kitchen. I think most of you remember it, Jim?
No, I
Well,
remember it
you
from
probably-
pictures, but I don't remember it. It was on the north side of 116th, wasn't it?
It was right next to, Trinity Foods had a grocery store, and I don't know if those buildings are still in there. And then there was White Kitchen, but the Wainwright Bank, I think it was Wainwright, had a bank there for a while. And then the post office was just next to that. And then the tavern was on down. There was a road there that went to the elevator. But speaking of the elevator, in I think it was 57 or 58, I helped as a laborer build that cement silo there. And guys, there was no safety or anything. We rode hooks up to go up, and jack the forms up when they was pouring that thing. But it was a good job, and they paid well. But there's so much history around Fishers and everything, and you didn't think too much of it as a kid, growing up. But Larry Reynolds has done a fantastic job putting all this stuff together.
Yeah.
He did it for alumni, and he's written books and stuff like that. But I'll tell you a funny story on myself. Fishers had no stop signs, just had 2 or 3 street lights. Of course, I come out of home there and get on Lantern Road and go to 116th Street and to go to Northern Beach, where a lifeguard over there. But I wouldn't stop at 116th Street. I just shift it and go on. Well, they got a marshal in probably 1956, somewhere, Junior Howard, I think was his name. But anyway, I come up there and I threw it in second gear, went around. Of course, he stopped me. And he said, "Did you see that stop sign?" I said, "No, I did not." He said, "Well, we got a stop sign. You got to stop now." So a couple of days later, I've come up there and I threw in second gear, and all of a sudden I thought, and I slid out into the intersection. Well, he come up there and he said, "You remembered, didn't you?" I said, "Yes, I did." But I was in the middle of 116th Street. But back in those days, most of us young kids, we worked either picking tomatoes, picking in summertime, strawberries or apples. There was a big strawberry place, Benford's run. There was a big apple orchard up on 106th Street. I think Collier's was the name, and Moon's moved there later. And then, of course, we baled hay, and that's how you made your money. But the best money, in my opinion, back then was picking apples. And one thing we were told, you had to pick the apple by the stem, and you didn't shake the trees, you picked the apples. And a couple of kids that I knew needed jobs, and they got jobs over there. And we was leaving, checking out, and they lost their job. And I said, what happened? I guess they decided it was easier to shake the tree and get the apples than it was to pick them. But they got caught and it didn't work. It's, I can remember the Nickel Plate Railroad. I can remember as a kid going down to the depot. Mr. Turner ran the depot. And what amazed me more than anything as a kid walking in there was all the wanted posters all over the walls. Back then they posted them, and one that I always thought was it was a fine if you spit tobacco on the floor. But with most people back those days, smoke cigars or chew tobacco, most men. But another story, my dad, I told you, he had a service station there, the Manship Garage later after. And he told me, he said, Fishers played their basketball games on the second floor of that. Now, that building is where the hardware was at, but the mill was just to the west of it. And Dad said they played their basketball games there upstairs, and also every once in a while they would have dances up there. And Mac Reynolds, which Mac Sr. Played in it. Eller, which was Van Eller's dad. Jude Beaver. There was three names that I remember, and I know Jude Beaver played a bass fiddle, and he was offered I was told that he was offered a pretty good sum of money to go play for some. I'm not sure who it was, but he wouldn't leave Fishers. But another story about Jude Beaver. He was a big trapper, and they was putting Geist Reservoir in, and he had traps out there, and it was supposed to take several months for that to fill, but they got a big storm, and Jude was rather upset because he lost a lot of traps that he had around the reservoir. But like I said, it couldn't have any better life growing up as a kid. We swam and dammed up north of Fishers on 126th Street, I think it is, Fuller's Woods. But all of us kids would go up there, boys, and we dammed up the creek, and we had a swimming hole and had a rope, but there was another story to that. We worked 2 or 3 days damming all that up and had our swimming hole about 3 or 4 feet deep, and a truck come out down, and it was Bill Beaver, and he was rather upset because we shut off all the water going on down to his cattle. And he said, I should have you boys tear that down, but he said, I'm going to let you, it's going over the dam now. But, just kids having fun. And we would, there was 2 barbershops in town, one there by the telephone exchange on 116th, and another a lot of people probably don't remember this, but they're on the west west of the depot. There was a place called Harry Wright ran it. It had a grocery store, pool hall, and barbershop. And none of you probably ever knew anything about that. But anyway, they played a lot of farmers, and men would come in there in the evening. They played a lot of pinochle there. And then also they played euchre there at the tavern. But, you know, at the barber that we had, I think we called him, and Wilbur, you might enjoy this, Butcher Bill. I think.
Oh, I knew him. I was
he-
mad at him. My dad didn't like my cowlicks, and so in the 60s, which everybody was doing the beetle haircuts, he clipped me all the way down to the buzz job, which I kind of what I have now.
Yeah.
But I put a bucket over my head later. But anyway,
Yeah, they called him. Most of the kids called him Butcher. But you know, another thing, Cass Tater's store, which Archer had a meat market in there later, but us kids would go up there and they had Coke machines outside there, and of course, Cokes for a nickel. And there'd be 5 or 6 of us, and we had a little game. We'd put the nickels in a pot and get a Coke out, and of course, on the bottom of those Coke bottles, it was where it was made, and whoever had the one made the farthest away got the pot, which was 25 or 30 cents. But every once in a while, you get a bottle made in Atlanta, Georgia. You know, most of them came out of Anderson. That's where the Coca-Cola plant was. But those are things, you know, we did as kids. And I was trying. Another
I
thing.
got a question. I've got
Okay.
a question for you. You were on the fire department. I remember when they had a siren on top of that silo, and I don't know. Is that how they called the firemen in? Was that siren, or what was that purpose of that siren on top?
My dad installed that. Yes, it was how the volunteers. It was a siren, and the firemen had a red phone, and there were just a few of those, and most of those were located right around Fishers. Joe Marks had one. Dickie Woods was instrumental. Him and I can't think for Deb Clark's wife. I can't think of her name right now, but she was very instrumental in getting the first emergency vehicle for the fire department. Of course, that came later, but that siren, they would put it off. Now, another thing, back before we had the fire department, the fire truck was in Milo Booth's
Right.
garage. It was right across from the lumber yard. Well, the lumber yard caught fire. And guess what fire department was the first one there? Castleton.
oh
They
really?
couldn't get the fire truck going. They had to shove it across the street. But, you know, and fortunately, it was the parts where they stored a lot of the lumber. And it did quite a bit of damage, but they rebuilt it. But it was after that, I think they decided they needed a fire department. And of course, Wilbur.
I was asking them why they took that siren down, because the siren came down before they tore down the silo, and they said nobody knew how to turn it on, because we've got sirens all over town for tornado watch and stuff like that. I said, why did they take that down? They said nobody knew how to turn it on.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It may have been, the switch may have been there at the firehouse on 116th Street, the one they built. I really don't know the answer to that. I know my dad put the siren up there, wired it. And that's what I was talking about, you know. Never, you know, it was all volunteer. You didn't get no money for doing anything. You know, people just did it that way. And same way with church work and stuff like that. But the volunteer fire department was, I think there was probably 20 guys in it when I was in it, you know. And like I said, Chet Raybo, and Dickie Woods. And I think Jim Wilkins one time was a chief there and everything. But
Who
it
got
was
to
a-
drive the truck?
pardon
Who
me?
got to drive the truck? I said,
Well,
who got to drive the truck?
Well, Dickie Woods and Joe Marks, I think, drove the truck most of the time. Maybe I can't remember. I know I didn't drive the truck. I was always because it was people that were close, and I lived out of town at that time, and it took me a little while to get there. But we, you know, went up to when they had the biggest fire we had was when Golke's up at Noblesville caught fire, and we lost a fireman in that. Buddy Moeller was killed up there, but it almost took the whole square of Noblesville. But we had fire departments coming from everywhere, and we pumping water out of White River, and finally got the thing under control. But like I said, I think it was some acetylene tanks exploded inside the building and blew the wall down. And Buddy and another fireman, he wasn't hurt. I don't know who that was, but it took Buddy's life, which was a tragedy. He was worked at Ford and probably in his late 20s or early 30s. And I think he had 3 or 4 children, but that was not good.
So, hey, Maurice, I got a question for you. I've heard from Larry Reynolds and some other people that you could drive backwards faster than most people could drive forwards. Is that true?
Now, you're not supposed to talk about that. Yeah, I like 14-year-old kid, and I'd sneak the car out and didn't really know how to turn the speedometer back, but I found out I could drive a mile forward and put it in reverse and take that mile off. Well, I could drive just about as good backwards as I could forward. So some people called Mom and said, your son had the car out and driving and everything. She went out and checked the mileage, and she said, no, he didn't. She said, I checked the mileage and it's right where it should be. But yeah, I could almost drive one. Well, Wilbur, I told this to Wilbur, we, as kids, every once in a while we decide we want to smoke a cigarette or something like that. And we would ride our bicycles down to Castleton, and a gentleman by Keith Brunson, I think was his name, ran that store down there. And we pulled our money together. I think a pack of cigarettes was like 20 cents or something like that. But we'd ride our bikes all the way down there and get the cigarettes. But something I shouldn't have done, but we did it.
That way your
Yeah.
parents wouldn't find
Pardon me?
that way your parents wouldn't find out.
Oh, Wilbur, they knew. It was just like when I was swimming up there in that Fuller's Woods. Well, first we leave our underwear on. Of course, you know what that water would do to us. And then we'd take them off and hang them up, let them dry out, but they would be kind of yellow from the sand and everything. And Mom knew, she knew what we were doing, and she knew, but she handled it real well. And like I said, the biggest, when we was like 13 or 14, I think we could work. We had to get a Social Security card, but we worked at Northern Beach. And 35 cents an hour is what they paid. And of course, all the kids came over there. And it was just a great place to work. And that's where I met my wife. I was a lifeguard there, and she worked in the checkout counter. And we met there. And of course, later got married, but kids from Noblesville, Castleton, Carmel, Fishers, all around came to Northern Beach until they got to, and then Castleton finally put in a real nice pool there. And I'm not really sure time frame that was. Do you remember, Wilbur, when Castleton?
I remember, of course, Forest Park got the pool up in Noblesville. I didn't like Northern Beach. That pool was spring fed, and that was the coldest water. That was the
one
coldest water
Northern Beach was right there at 116th and White River, wasn't it? It's kind of an empty field now, full of goldenrod. It's next to there's a house that sits up there, overlooking it, and it's right next to that senior living community. But that's where it was.
Yeah.
I remember when it was still Northern Beach. I just don't know. A lot of people know that there was ever a park there.
Jim Steckley, which he ran a restaurant over in Carmel, he moved a big mansion. It was a Malburger. He owned a big furniture store down in Indianapolis, and he had a mansion over on River Road on 116th Street. Well, American Aggregate bought all that, and he moved that mansion from over there, River Road, to up there on Northern Beach on that hill you're talking about. And
I think they call that the Black Iris now.
Yeah, it's an event center.
They have
What's
weddings there.
Yeah.
But of course, Northern Beach, when White River would come up with flood. And I can tell you, as a kid, it come up fast. And Franny was the woman that ran it. And we had ropes and chains they kept in the shelter house there. And we would actually be going through the water and all these picnic tables and stuff. We'd run cables through them and tie them to trees so they wouldn't float away. But the water would be up 2 or 3 feet in the concession stand. And of course, it flooded the pool, and they had to drain it, clean all the mud up, and repump it. But yeah, that was cold water. It was there was 2, I think, 8-inch or 10-inch wells there. And of course, there's lots of water right in through that basin there from, it's gravel. Of course, American Aggregate come in there and start taking gravel out of there. And, but it was cold. It was always cold water. But
it was cold.
Yeah.
Maurice, I was going to say, you were talking about those events. When I was a kid, my 3 favorite things was the Fisher's Fish Fry. Couldn't wait for that because we get to run wild and play all the games and do all the stuff. And the John Deere days at Max Reynolds' place, and then also the county fair up in Noblesville. Those were that was my whole big thing. That was my playtime. I was going to introduce Robert Kincaid over here real quick. Robert, I just saw you pop up here a little while ago. So, and the people that don't know Robert might know the name is that the Kincaid House probably has got a little fame. That's right there on 69 that you grew up in. So, but introduce yourself, Robert.
Bob Kincaid, and yes, my life probably started in that house, and I was there till 7 years old. During that 7 years, we never did have indoor plumbing. And so in the wintertime, I got to be a very fast runner. About 75 foot to the smaller building. And but it was a dairy farm at that point. And so I got I was probably about 6 years old when I got my first car there, convertible as the case would have been. Of course, I did have to pedal on it, motor. And adding to something Maurice said too, he would remember the Grays, and there before they put the curve in Lantern Road, it was straight, and they were right there on the corner that you used to speed by their house probably. And at any rate, she was a Cub Scout leader. And so that's where I used to go to the Cub Scout meetings at her house when I was a little squirt. And then after that move from the Flanagan house, and actually Cora Flanagan, when she sold the farm to my grandfather's case would have been, the grandmother, she moved next to what would have been the Fisher School with the 12 grades in it. She lived on the south side there in the corner. And at that house, then she used to babysit with me because after Dad went into the family business in about 46, and then Don went in about 47. But at any rate, we moved to Fisher's, and where the post office is where the next 7 years of my life were spent at that house. And that was a farm at that point with a very nice barn at the rear. And then it went on to have a large corn crib. And of course, that's what they used to do at that time, pick the corn on the ear, put it in the cribs and so forth. And then it had a big hog barn to the side then too. And but it was quite a nice farm, and it was a good spot to live. So and we did have indoor plumbing there too. And but in the northern beach that you're speaking about, I used to hop on my bicycle and then meet Jim and Jerry Powell at the corner there at Allisonville Road. It was 37 then. And then we'd go on to Northern Beach, and usually Joe Wilkins, and there were several. And of course, as you mentioned, they came from all the north side of Indianapolis. But that was, I used to do a flip off of the low board. And the last flip I ever did was off of the high board there, and it was not a good landing. And that was the last flip I ever did in my life. Oh, and then on before it became 69, it was 37, and before it was 4 lanes on 37 or anything of that nature. It was 2 lanes, and prior to that, grass fields. And I remember helping bale hay there at about 106 one afternoon. And there were little 2x2 stakes out, which later became, those were the markers for the road later. And then before they actually opened the road up, it was finished. It was blocked off on both ends, but 4 of us rode our bicycles from Fishers down to the state fairgrounds on it. And then we rode back. So it was a nice ride. And the downside to it too probably is at that time there weren't 10-speed bikes, there were 3-speed bikes. That was a fast one, and mine didn't have any speeds other than how fast your pedals went. So,
Bob, do you remember when Reynolds would take all their farm equipment down to the fair?
oh yes, yeah, right down the highway and so forth.
Yes.
Yes, most definitely so. And as a matter of fact, as you were talking, Mac Reynolds' dad, and I think it was your dad, all dressed up in skirts and did a dance song for a function in Fishers at one point. They were entertainers for one night.
Yeah.
So I think either Larry, I think's got a photo of it, and then I know I've got one as well too. And they made a nice little trio. So
That's funny.
You know, Bob, when Judy and I got married and we moved back to Fishers, she played cards and everything. And I told her, I said, now you want to be careful what you say because everybody's related.
Yeah.
And yeah. And she found out that's true. You know, we're fairly close knitted group of people. But, you know, a funny story Dad told, I asked him about the dance when they had the dances up there. Of course, that had to be in the late 20s, early 30s. And he said, I said, well, did they serve drinks or anything like that? And he said, no, most of the guys just walked up to the tavern. But, you know, that was, and I asked him, I think he said it was 50 cents a couple. And that money went to pay for the group, you know, to play music and stuff like that. But also in the early years, in the 50s, they had square dancing at the American Legion on Allisonville Road.
yes,
And
where the
Saturday night, and
printer is now.
take their kids out there, and they had bales of hay around. We sat on them, people with square dance, but the high, I did fail to mention the high. There was Powell's, the corner, what we called the corner, ran by the Powell's, and then there was a highway garage that was just down south of that, in the building where they had the square dancing was just a little south of that. But there was a little grocery store there, Simpsons, I think, ran that, and there was a garage, Oscar Cannon. You remember that name, Bob? Oscar Cannon? ran the garage, and they had a little restaurant just to the south of that. But we played sometimes when we played basketball back in those days. It was a big treat. If the White Kitchen was open or Simpsons to the highway, we would stop there after the games and get hamburgers and milkshakes and stuff like that. But that was a big deal because there wasn't any fast food or anything like that back then. But then after the White Kitchen closed, we mostly went out the highway if they had the money to do that. But anyway, what Bob was telling about, I was in that Cub Scout troop that met at Gray's. Margaret Gray was her name.
Yeah.
Gary Gray and Linda Gray and
Yes.
Carol Gray with the kids. But I think we lost Gary a few years ago. And but we had I made a birdhouse out here where I live now. I took an old tomato can and cut a hole in it. But that was the first little project I had as a Cub Scout there. We made wren houses, and somebody said, "Well, where did you get that idea?" I said, "That comes from Cub Scouts when I was a kid, But yeah, it was a great time. And where you lived there on the farm on down where Marguerite Smith lived one farther down, and the manship had that Lule something acres they called it. It was kind of
All
a
the
nice
acres.
back there. But I think I told Wilbur this when I was delivering papers. Every once in a while, the operator Hanks, I can't think of her first name, but anyway, she come out and have a message that to give to R.D. Smith. Came from Dayton, I guess. And I'd take my bicycle and run out, take it out to RD, and I get, like a quarter or something like that. But it was big money back then. But that's the way things were done. Yeah, just people, like I said before, people took care of people and kids. We didn't have
everybody being related. I was sitting there thinking. I figured out that in 1960 census, I would have been 3. And there were 300 people in Fishers. There were 11 Morgans of my family, not counting cousins. So, like you said, everybody, was cross-pollinating. So I know the Kincaid's were cross-pollinating with a bunch of people, as far as that as well. So I do want to point out a couple of things that we do as outreach. Shelley, you do some really cool things. You've done some things with like plat maps and gone to some different events. You want to tell us a little about that?
Yeah. So I've been trying to look at some of the old Fishers maps, pre-Civil War, or even I found one 1922, I believe it was. So that's been interesting to try to figure out. Actually, while Maurice has been talking, I've been thinking about all these locations and seeing if I've heard of Bob or Maurice's names, because I keep just looking at maps and seeing the old names out there. And so it's just very interesting to hear you tell your stories about some of the people I've seen on a map, even like whether it was it probably would have been an older relative, but it's still, the name carries on. So it's interesting. And I've been trying to take those maps, and we've done the, what is it? The Harvest Fest, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I take an old map and then I overlay a new map on top of it. And I put it on a huge poster board, and people can walk by and put a pin in where they live now. And they'll see who owns the property before. So who owned the property in 1922. So a couple of years ago, I made a map that had the old 1922 and then I think it was 2023, but either way, I said, who owned your property 100 years ago? And I think that got people interested. And they also did it again this year. Who owned your property before the Civil War? And it was just the Fishers map with those property landowners on them. And I think that gets people interested of making that connection because they live there now. and they can look at.
Shelley, I might add a little bit to that.
Sure.
My great grandfather, I found out my aunt just turned 100 years old. She lives up in Anderson, but I found out that my great grandfather Fuller
Mhm.
was one of the largest landowners in Hamilton County at
Mhm.
in the 1800s, early 1900s, and also
I've
my
heard of that name.
my grandmother uh, on the Johnson side,
Mhm.
she was a Brooks,
Yep.
and they owned quite a bit of land. And the Brooks School Road was that land was donated, and everything. But there was, a lot of this stuff I found out later when I got older. Like I said, I didn't find this out until about my great grandfather Fuller until about 4 or 5 months ago.
Huh.
But I said he was the largest landowner in Hamilton County, and she said yes. I said that's unbelievable, but the Kincaid
Hey,
house,
Bob,
the Kincaid
oh,
house.
I was going to ask Bob. I was going to ask Bob the name of the people on that 1897 diploma that you donated, that the Historical Society took over to Fishers High School. What was the name of that? I didn't know if anybody here recognized that name.
His name was Charles Irwin.
Yeah, so I know remember the Irwins.
The Irwin sounds familiar. But
And the Kincaid house
That's,
actually, and Bob may have mentioned this, but I think one was a Sears Roebuck house.
Yeah, that was the first one that
Yeah,
my
brought
grandfather
in
did
on the
that.
railroad.
And that one's still there.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was in 32. I think that they brought that in. And then there's a little small building behind that they lived in for a short time while they were getting that all set up. And my father did tell me one time that he helped with the gentleman that was doing the wiring, electrical wiring there. And Dad would tell him what color the wire was because the electrician was colorblind and couldn't tell.
that had to be my dad.
And it kept it from burning down probably. And but I did have an opportunity to go in that house because that would have been what 32 and maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago with someone I was working with in real estate. And I was surprised that there were some of the fixtures and so forth were still some of the same fixtures when I was a little kid there. And of course, bathrooms and kitchens had changed. And they added a large bathroom upstairs then too. But it's interesting to go back into an older, Jim did it on the Flanagan house and went into that house.
That
And,
was scary.
yeah.
I will say the first floor, just if anybody's thinking about going in there, don't. The first floor, I was in the construction business for like 27 years. It's imaginary. I really don't know what's holding it up. So second floor is not bad. The first floor, yeah, no, you don't want to do it. So
Yeah.
I was talking to Gail Kincaid, and she went in there, I think, a year or two ago, and actually fell through the floor.
yeah, I tell you, yeah, I couldn't figure out why we hadn't. I kept looking at where it's supposed to be attached. It's not attached. So
where's the Flanagan house?
the Flanagan.
Where is the Flanagan house?
That's
Over by
Oh.
IKEA, you'll see it on I-69.
Okay, so that same house. Okay.
Yeah.
I also want to go with Robert. Robert, you are a published author. You've got 2 books and you've done several outreach programs for us. You want to kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the first outreach programs we did was early this summer. We partnered with the Indianapolis Sailing Club and hosted a presentation on Germantown and Geist Reservoir, which is really cool because the ISC was one of the first, businesses on Geist when they built it, and it was really cool to see the turnout of people who was actually interested to understand about Germantown. Most people have no idea that we just basically got rid of an entire city for that reservoir. And a lot of people they don't know the history. So it was really, really cool to see the turnout for that event. And it's also prompted us to try to work on getting an historical marker. That's been something on my agenda for like the last 2 years. I've been working with the Indiana German Heritage Society and working with a few people in Geist to hopefully get a historical marker. I don't think we can get a state marker like the one that we have for the grave robbing, but we could try to do something very local.
Well, and also tell us about the one the grave robbery when you spearheaded that and got that done.
Yeah, so 1903, there was a big grave robbing trial that took place in Indianapolis and one that took place in Noblesville, and during the turn of the century, grave robbing was a pretty big deal. People were stealing bodies not for profit. Well, in a way, it was for profit, but not what you would think. Stealing artifacts from the graves. They were stealing bodies for medical schools.
Right.
Medical schools needed cadavers. There was a shortage, and so these medical schools were actually paying people to go and dig up graves. And so there is 2 graves in Highland Cemetery. At the time was Beaver Cemetery. So it's the cemetery right off of Hoosier Road that does the S curve. And there's at least 2 bodies in there that there's no bodies in the grave. And that's because we could get that from newspaper reports. But I guarantee there's a lot more bodies out there that have been taken from those graves. And I spearheaded a project to get an historical marker. Hamilton County has, if I remember correctly, we have about 9 or 10 historical markers throughout the county, but Fishers has none. And we got a marker for the grave robbing. And it wasn't to commemorate or honor the grave robbing. Obviously, bodies were stolen. But one thing that it did was because of the grave robbing, the legislature tried to find a way to prevent it from happening in the future. So they created the State Anatomical Board, which was a process in which if you wanted to donate your body to science, you could sign a form and they would take your body. And it was a way to fairly give bodies to different medical schools for dissection. And that program is still in existence today. So it was passed in 1903, the same year that all these trials went on. And that board is still in existence today, and it's run by the IU Medical School. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And so now we have a marker to commemorate it. And that marker is located at the Fall Creek Township Trustee's office.
Is that the same grave robber group that was run by that doctor out of Fishers?
Yes. So Dr. Alexander, who was, he was the prodigal son of Fishers. Everybody loved him because he was he started off as a school teacher. He went to medical school. He graduated with honors, and he became the head of the anatomy department at the Central College of Surgeons in Indianapolis. And so everybody in Fishers was like, man, this is guy, he did it. He was amazing. And then he got wrapped up in the grave robbing, and he was implicated as the mastermind behind the grave robbing. He was the one that was paying people to go and dig up these graves and bring the bodies to the medical school. And after that, the people of Fishers really didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore.
And your 2 books,
Digging
one is
up-
Wicked Fishers, right?
Yeah, my first book was Wicked Fishers. Yep.
And then the other one is what?
So my second book is Hoosier Vigilantes. It just came out back in October. And so Wicked Fishers obviously is a book that focuses on some of the more salacious, scandalous parts of history, but it's more local just to Fishers. So if you're not from Fishers, it's not a book that is really going to be interesting to you because you won't really understand a lot of the stuff in it. My second book is called Hoosier Vigilantes, and it focuses more of a statewide book, and it focuses on all the vigilante groups that have ever existed in the state of Indiana. But it also tells the story of law enforcement. So that's my background. I'm retired law enforcement. So it tells the story of the lone marshal in the frontier to the modern day police department, and basically how those two intertwine. We still have vigilantism today. It's in different forms. It may not be what you would think back in the 1800s, but we still have it today.
Excellent. Shirley, you were telling me that you do a lot of this stuff of looking for old graveyards and various and sundries. Would you kind of fill us in?
Well, there are 15, so we're going to go back farther in Hamilton County history. 15 patriots of the Revolutionary War buried in the county, and 3 of them are in the Fishers area. And this was how I got involved with the Fishers Historical Society, by getting a hold of Diane Welchel, because one of those patriots that we commemorated, and our DAR chapter, was Davis Welchel Jr. And he's buried behind a private home out on 116th, just east of Oleo Road. And the Welchels and the Abneys and the Helms and the Beavers and the Flanagans, they all married, within families. And he died in the 1830s. These guys were really hardy men who had fought, during the Revolutionary War. He was kind of one of the more storied ones because he was a private, a major, a lieutenant, a spy, and a ranger. And that's in his records, at the National DAR. So it was thought for many years that his grave was lost and probably under Geist. But his 4th great granddaughter, who lives in Marion, Indiana, worked with Joe Burgess, who used to be one of the Hamilton County Cemetery Commissioners back in, I'd say it was about 92, in that time period. And they found this grave in the old defunct Welchel cemetery. There's probably 6 other family members there buried as well with him, but they're just field stones. And they were able to get a military stone for him. And then our DAR chapter commemorated his service and so on with a plaque and so on. And we always lay wreaths on the Wreaths Across America Day, which was December 14th, at all the Patriot graves. Another one who was on the 1830 census with Davis Welchel Jr. and George Abney, and they're just living close together, is Samuel Torrens. And sometimes it's spelled like E-N-C-E at the end, other times O-N-S. We don't know where he's buried. And that's about half of the 15. We don't know where they're buried. Typically, they've been in cemeteries connected to their farm. So a lot of times we're researching the old land records from the 1830s and the census records to find out where they were living. But we have yet to find his grave site. It could be in somebody's backyard. It could be in a wooded area, just like the Welchel one was, because it just field stones marking the graves. And so a lot of times they're just never found. So even though he has a record, I think he was born in, many of these guys were born like in Virginia, and then ended up serving for Virginia or South Carolina in a militia. And so we're still looking for him, and would like to, be able to identify him and honor him with a plaque and information. George Abney is connected to that Highland Cemetery, and his descendants are buried there. We presume he's buried there, but we don't have actual proof that he's buried there. And again, those Abneys, Helms, Welchels, Beavers, Flanagans, they were all married. Daughters married, sons, and sons married other daughters in the family. But those 3 particular men are what we would now say Fishers residents, and fought in the Revolutionary War. So it's one of the things that we do in our chapter. And the county commissioners, if you get up to Noblesville, you could take a look at the Veterans Memorial that's just on the west side of the courthouse. The county commissioners just installed a plaque, and we'll have a ceremony in the spring to dedicate that plaque that has all 15 names of the Revolutionary War soldiers that are buried in the county. We're always looking for others. There probably are others. Saul Carey's one that we just happened upon about a year ago, supposedly buried on the old Carey farm. Will we ever find him? Hard to say. You know, it's not easy to find these guys. Another one was supposedly buried. It would be west of Riverview Hospital, for instance, in Noblesville, out there as you're going towards Westfield. And in the 60s, one of the property owners decided he wanted more room for his parking lot. I think it was an implement dealer, and took a bulldozer and pushed those graves over the hill down into close to Cicero Creek. So there's still remnants of that graveyard. And Sid Davis, who owns, I think, used to at least own a place where you could hit golf balls, you know, practice out in, again, west of out there on 32. He was a kid at the time, and his dad said there's a Revolutionary War patriot buried in that cemetery. We don't know which one it is. We'll never find out, probably. But kind of like Shelley, we look at old maps, we look at the land grants, and the census and everything we can to try to find these guys.
I may sick you on to help me get the New York group together on this. I've got a pet project. I've been emailing congressmen and stuff, trying to get people to pay attention. There are 300 Revolutionary War men who basically did a Thermopylae in the Brooklyn Heights battle, the one that Washington had to escape across the river in the fog, or we would have lost right there. And there were 300 men from Maryland who fought to keep the British at bay, and every one of them are dead from that battle. And they're buried somewhere there, and no one knows where they are. There could be a building on top of them. They have no idea. There's no marker. There's a VFW post that has a plaque on the wall that somewhere around there. But that to me needs to be, if it wasn't for them, the war would have been over that night.
Yeah, right.
So
do they know their names? Is that correct?
I'm sure we can probably figure that out. But that would be that kind of stuff. That's very cool. There's so many things out there. Well, guys, I can't believe we're out of time, but this has been a lot of fun. I thought it was going to be, and so I could probably go for another 2 or 3 hours, but Maurice, thanks for coming and joining with us, and all of you guys, I appreciate it so much. It was a lot of fun to hear the stories. And if you're listening to this, come join us. Shirley, could you tell us where we are and when we are and that kind of stuff, and how people can come join us up at the meeting?
We meet the second Tuesday night of every month. And those meetings are already scheduled. They start at 7 o'clock, and we're at the Delaware Township Trustees Building. It's the brick building that faces
Delaware
31st
Center. Yeah.
Delaware
Right.
Township Trustees Building. We meet up on the second floor, and we have lots of stories and things to share. And we want everyone else's stories. They've got the stories like Maurice does about. I'm sure those hamburgers and milkshakes never have tasted any better than they did after those ball games. Those were real hamburgers, and they were real chocolate malts and shakes. So, come and tell your stories, share your pictures, just everything that you know about Fishers in the old days.
And if you don't have old Fisher stories, Robert is fairly new to Fishers. Shelley is. They've brought so much to the game as well. If you don't have the old stories, we can do other things together, right? I mean, there's
Right.
opportunities for people that weren't born here 70 years ago, right?
Right.
Okay. So, well, guys, thank you so very much. Enjoy. Oh, wait a minute, we got someone that's asking a question here. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, anyway, so Robert had to jump off to go pick up his kid. But anyway, so we are done. Thank you so much. This will be on our Facebook page. You can share it as you like, please do. And we'll visit with all of you later. Mercy, thanks for
Okay.
getting all and look at you on the Zoom thing, man. I'm impressed. So so
It's fun. Thank you.
all right. All right. See you guys.
See you
Bye-bye.
later.
Yeah.
Bye.